I will
Okay,
tell.
hold on.
I will say exactly what I want to
No,
say, and
that's what.
you will just have to deal
Shut
with
it.
it.
Shut up. Shut up. Yeah, good.
All right.
Mm.
So
This might be dangerous, I thought.
I think I think you might have asked for
I regret this.
more than you're going to get more than you bargained for here.
Okay.
Okay, so I am Karen Strawn, and I am here today with Bettina Arndt. She is the author of The Sex Diaries and What Men Want in Bed. She's a sex therapist and a dating coach for women, I believe, right?
Yeah, some men, some
Some
men. I heard about probably about a quarter male. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and so and part of one of the things that I love about Bettina is she actually sent me a link to an article that was written in a newspaper by a different dating coach, referencing that beautiful Marilyn Monroe quote: "If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best." And but the title had been changed. The title of this article was "If he can't handle you at your worst, maybe stop sucking so much." and uh, and I just loved that because it really puts an onus on women to behave better, to be better partners. And I don't think that I think that these days in society there's this Greek chorus hovering around women's heads, telling them you deserve everything from a partner, and you shouldn't have to give one damn thing. And you have been a voice of reason in that entire discussion and within the culture in that um, women should have to compromise just like men do, and women should have to be giving just like men are, and women should have to adjust themselves just like men do, and women should try not to be giant cunts just like men should. And so, pardon my language. I don't know if you
No, no, no,
but
no, no.
so how did you get into this? I want to know the whole history of sort of or the abridged history of how you got into this kind of work.
Well, how I got into it, I mean, it was the sex stuff. I haven't been a sex therapist for 40 years. I was an abysmal sex therapist because I'm not patient enough, and I got fed up with people not doing what I wanted them to do. I'm not the sort of person who just sits there and nods and listens to people. Anyway, but that's where it began. I moved from being a sex therapist to getting out there and talking about sex on radio and television and writing about it. And as a result of that, I mean, I was originally trying to help women. My goal, I mean, I was calling myself a feminist. I'd read all the feminist literature. I was very excited by doing something for women. But it was men who started to capture my interest at a certain point, because when men talk to you about sex, they talk to you about everything. And so they started pouring their hearts out to me, and I started listening to them. And very quickly, I realized the whole cultural dialogue is absolutely captured by the female perspective. And if you start to say anything in support of men, if you try to say, well, but hang on, this is how men feel, you're howled down. And I suppose my initial attraction to sex was the fact that people weren't allowed to talk about it back in the 70s.
Mm.
And here was another big area where no one was allowed to talk about how men feel. And I thought, bugger that, I'm in there. And I've been doing that ever since. I mean, I'm really attracted to the fact that there are all these areas of men's lives which aren't getting a look in. No one can talk about it. And that is like a moth to the flame for me. And also, I love men. I grew up with two brothers. I have a daughter and two sons, but I worry more about my sons in various ways. And I just think men are being screwed. Well, they're not being screwed, which is one of the problems.
They're being
Yeah,
screwed,
I want
just
to
not in
talk
the way
about,
they
but
want.
they're being screwed. They're screwed in every other way than the way they want.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
no,
that's it.
I kind of I came into this sort of men's issues activism and men's rights activism from the same way, essentially, is just seeing the way men were kind of talked down. Like who was it? There was an ancient feminist from ages ago who said. She wrote in the Guardian, like I go around and I see men being rubbished everywhere, right? And you know, one of the things that has always gotten me Because I come from a very, in Alberta, we have a resource economy. So it's pretty rare to be a woman and not have a brother or a son or a father or a cousin or, a nephew or somebody who's out there in a cherry picker fixing power lines during a windstorm or something like that, or out working on an oil rig, or doing one of those jobs that no women really want to do,
Yeah.
but that are absolutely necessary for everything that we enjoy, right? Like the safety and the security and the comfort and all of those things, right? And so I think that in a place like Alberta, we are more likely to appreciate our men and what they do for us. And what really has always gotten me was, when you see feminists claiming, that it's an injustice that women can't walk around without fear, right? That they can't walk anywhere they want, in whatever state they want, and not be afraid. And I'm thinking to myself, because I'm looking out my window and I'm seeing the squirrels outside, right? And, like they do three little hops and then they stop and they look around to see if something is going to eat them now, right? And then they do three more little hops and then they look around and they see, is something going to eat me now? Right? And then you walk by 100 feet away with your dog on a leash and they just freeze and you can see their little hearts just like pumping and their lungs just filling with oxygen, getting ready to run, because that's their life. Their life is constant fear. And the only reason why we don't live like that is because of all of this shit that men have given us through their blood and their sweat and their sacrifice and all of those things. And so when I think about the ingratitude on the part of women who, they're going to act like, a woman consenting to sex when she's too drunk to really make a good decision, that's rape, and he should go to prison for that. And that's the way it is, because the entire world is just this huge injustice against women built by men. And I'm thinking to myself, the only reason you have anything that trivial to complain about is because men have given you everything.
But also that there are plenty of males who have to look around very often to see who's following them.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of vulnerable men. I mean, where's the major violence in all our cultures is male to male violence, and the weaker men get jumped on just as women in certain situations will.
Oh, of course.
So that's part of that story. This whole thing is just rife with hypocrisy.
It's ridiculous. Like whether the perpetrator is male or female, any violence is more likely to be perpetrated against a male, and that starts right from the word go, right from the kid is still in diapers, and his mother starts hitting him 2 to 3 times more often as she hits her daughter. So it just really is like I think that men are just this huge. They are the backbone of everything that we have, and we just will not appreciate them. And honestly, sex is part of that. Sex is part of the appreciation, and it should be.
Yeah, well, it should be, but it's not. And I mean, I just think the way sex has played out over the last 40 years has been totally extraordinary. I mean, we did go from a situation back in the 50s, presumably, where there was an expectation that women would have sex with their husbands. Mm-hmm. There was an idea of conjugal rights, and that women had to lie back and think of England and suffer through unwanted sex. I mean, but essentially, that's the assumption, that lots of women were having really lousy sex then. I mean, I wonder about that, because more and more I'm thinking, if you have an expectation in your head that sex is going to be part of everyday life, and you accept that, maybe lots of those women actually enjoyed a lot more sex than women today are. Because the problem we have now, we've had this huge shift where we now assume that if a woman doesn't feel like sex, she doesn't have to have it. And lots and lots of women go for years in marriages not remotely feeling like having sex, and they never get it work on trying to get in the mood or do it, or let alone do anything for their partners.
Right.
And that means that they're missing out too. I mean, I think that a whole assumption that this was a lousy time for women was probably true for some women, but not all women. And now we have this thing where we're absolutely gripped by this notion that if it's a really bad thing for a woman to give sex to a man or to have a mercy fuck. I mean, to do it to make him feel good, to do it to show you care about him, to do it because you like giving him pleasure. All these other reasons why it's actually fun to turn a man on. It's fun to see him come, whatever it is. All that's gone out the window, and it's all framed in terms of rape and women giving in to men and men imposing themselves on women. I mean, the whole thing just makes me totally hopping mad.
It absolutely does. It's infuriating because there is something like, you know, my mom was saying to me when I was talking about this years ago with her when I started doing what I do. I was talking about, you know, this whole idea that the very first no, right, means, and that nagging, right, nagging is now rape, nagging on the part of a man. If he's like, oh come on, you know, that, and she gives in, then he's raped her, right?
Yeah.
And she says to me, you know, like, there have been lots of times with your dad where, you know, it's late and I have to be up early in the morning and he's in the mood and I'm not really, and he convinces me to just give it, and, you know, I might think the next morning, right, that I probably shouldn't have stayed up that late, right? But immediately afterwards, I'm thinking to myself, you know, that was a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Doing that.
That's what so many women say that to me. I always, I didn't feel like it, but it was really good, and I felt great afterwards. And I think, why don't we do that more often? And that thing in women's heads where they don't feel that they should do it if they're not in the mood is the thing that is totally screwing up relations between men and women. And it came from I think the point is it came from a good place. I mean, if you look back to the 60s and women's movement talking about marital rape, and I mean, no one wants men to rape women. No one wants men to feel like they can just, you know, throw them on the bed. And, well, some of us might like that idea, but no, essentially that obviously you have to have a right, women's right to say no. I mean, I'm not challenging that, but I'm saying women are crazy if they don't say yes a little bit more often. And what are they thinking? That this is a fair deal for men if they never say yes, if they go for year after year not having sex because they don't feel like it, and that maybe if they made a bit more effort, they would feel like it, as many of these women say to me. I mean, I was just playing with, you know, I did this big research project years ago, which has led to that book you mentioned, The Sex Diaries, and it was really about how do couples manage this stuff? How do couples negotiate getting into bed? And no one knows about how other couples deal with this, you know, the begging and the groveling and pleading. And we all, I mean, it's interesting how women sometimes will talk about it in a sort of jokey way, how do you get out of unwanted sex, you know, very much from the female perspective. But men hardly ever talk about it honestly and never talk to each other about what that feels like, to be always trying to look for that green light, to be desperately, I mean, men say from the moment they wake up, they're plotting and planning as to how in the hell can I get her in the mood? What can't I do? Oh, no, I don't dare watch that television program because she'll get pissed off. I have to watch what she wants to watch. You know, I have to put the dinner on. I have to put the kids to, and they do all this stuff and they still get knocked back.
Well, I think honestly, you know, because here's the thing, like, because there are a couple of researchers. One of them's name is Meredith Chivers, and she like, they've been researching, two female researchers who've been researching female sexual response, and they have found that it is a response, right? It is a response to certain cues, and it's not self-generating in the same way men's. So I mean, if you have a man who is, you know, completely undesirable, he is the ugliest man on the face of the planet, right? And he knows that no woman ever wants to have sex with him. He will still get horny, right? And he will still masturbate, and he will still have all of those feelings of lust, and he will look at women and he will want to have sex with them, right? But with women, what really gets them in the mood to have sex is to feel desired, right? Like they can't, and yes, men absolutely respond to feeling like they are desired, right? But it's not necessary, I don't think, in order to generate a sex drive in men the way it is in women, right? So this feeling of being desired, and once your bed is dead, right? That's it. Because he's no longer trying because he keeps getting rejected and he just gives up, right?
Yeah.
And she, therefore, is no longer feeling desired. And so she's not going to be the one to say one day, I think we should do it. Because she's not feeling horny unless some attractive guy at the bookstore looked at her or something like that. And then she goes home and projects that onto her husband. But, so women are really shooting themselves in the foot when they allow their bed to go dry, right? When they allow that to happen.
And it becomes a self-perpetuating thing.
Yes.
I mean, actually, in fact, it's a Canadian, Rosemary Basson, I don't know how she pronounces it. She did all this work on women who have no spontaneous desire, who go for years never remotely feeling like having sex. But she finds some of those women will have learned that once they get going, once they, I always talk about putting the canoe in the water and start paddling.
Yeah.
And if you're with a man who knows what he's doing, I mean, obviously, if you're with a man who's a hopeless lover, why would you bother?
Or
but if you're with someone
who's enthusiastic, right? Because enthusiasm.
But I think pleasure is part of the equation, and we have to build that in. I mean, when I was doing my research, I originally thought I didn't have to find out what people do in bed because it was all about how do you get there.
Yeah.
And then I realised that is a real issue. That because there are all these articles that start being written attacking me, saying women would want more sex if men weren't such hopeless lovers, and it is part of that story. And so I talked to the women about whether the men were good lovers or not, and a fair proportion of them were good. Mm-hmm. And the women still didn't want sex. I mean, it wasn't necessarily part of that equation. But what Rosemary Basson says is, if you're with someone who knows what he's doing, if you can get your head in the right place and anticipate pleasure, then there's a proportion of women who, when they just do it, desire kicks in when they get going. And that's has overturned the whole equation. I mean, when I was being trained 40 years ago, we were told desire has to come first. That unless there's desire, Masters and Johnson, all those researchers said desire precedes arousal and orgasm and so on. And so, of course, the feminists, the women's movement, picked that up and said, oh, well, without desires, women are going to have a terrible time and it won't work. Well, this absolutely overturns all of that, this research, because it shows that's not true. Many women desire won't be there in the beginning, but they will still have a good time.
Yeah.
So when I say to women, just do it, it's for their sakes, not just for the man's sake. Yeah. It's always presented as if it's something, where I'm saying that women should just do it to please men. And it's absolutely saying, for those women who know it works for them, why wouldn't you do it more often? For your own sake as well as for him.
Well,
and yet that's so unpopular, that whole notion.
Oh, God. Like the notion that women owe their husbands anything at all is, that's like a super taboo these days. Like you even go on dating sites and you look at the female profiles and instead of telling the men what they have to offer, right, they have a laundry list of demands for what they want in men. And you go and you look at the men's dating sites and dating profiles, and at the most they'll say, I want someone within this age range, and please no head games. Right?
Oh, as if.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what I'm doing, because my main day job is still this online dating coaching, which is really fascinating. And I work with all these older women, mainly women over 50, who have these huge shopping lists. And that's what, if they were writing their profile, that's what they'd say. I need this, I want this, you mustn't do this, you must. I mean, the whole list of do's and don'ts about the men they want.
Yeah.
And I say, get over yourself, lady. I mean, there's no way a man is going to be attracted to that. What your job? He's in a buyer's market. You're facing a shortfall in the number of available, interesting men, and your job is to attract them. And so I work really hard with these women to say, think about what you have to offer that guy. And
Yeah.
God, it's been a big shift in their mindset. I mean, these women don't think at all about what have I got that would attract a man? How can I please a man? And I of course always put sex in the equation. If I can possibly persuade them to put a little saucy touch in,
Yeah.
I add that because that's like a beacon to them. If they see any sign that this is a woman who hasn't shut up shop, they'll come running, particularly in the older age groups. And my women do really well. I sometimes feel a bit sorry for the men because I think I do too good a job of selling these women, who some of whom I wouldn't want to have anything to do with, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't necessarily control who your clients are, right? So
No, I know, but
there's
just the way they think about relationships sometimes really bothers me. I mean, they'll write to me, for instance, and say, all I keep meeting these men with limp dicks. These are the older women, and they go to bed with these men who can't get it up. And I would say to them, I mean, come on. How would you feel if he said, "Oh, I had this woman with this, ruby vagina, and she's all dried up"? And I mean, we
yeah,
all change as we get older. Men have problems with erections. We have problems with vaginal dry, whatever it is.
yeah,
And it's so insulting to humiliate a man over that. I mean, that is one of the big areas of vulnerability for men.
of course.
I've always been fascinated by men and their erections, and the fact that this as we know in the feminist diatribes, it's all about this thrusting, phallus that's dominating women. And in actual fact, it's his absolute point of vulnerability.
Of course. Absolutely, 100%.
And tragic.
Not
it's
just
just tragic.
not just emotionally, right? And psychologically, that this is something that is extremely important to his identity. And sort of
Absolutely.
bad mouthing it is really nasty.
Horrible.
But that it is the most vulnerable point on his body. It is what makes him a man, right?
Yeah.
And it can be cut off with a pair of scissors.
And people laugh about it.
Yeah.
People laugh about it. I mean, but also that, I just think men and their penises are so hilarious because it is this intense love affair that men have. I mean, you watch little boys, they can't keep their hands out of their pants.
Out of
they?
their diapers, for crying out loud.
I know. It's this wonderful thing. And little boys, when they first start realizing what a toy they've got there, I mean, they've got this fantastically visible gadget that gives them an enormous amount of pleasure. I've always loved watching men and dealing with their own bodies, and it's a very different sort of relationship from the way women deal with their bodies for various obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Here is this penis. One man said to me once, it has no other purpose. This was when he was a teenager. No other purpose other than to embarrass me,
Yeah.
because it was absolutely popping up at all the wrong moments, and women knew exactly when he was aroused, and he was humiliated dancing with her on whatever, all that stuff. And so it's this complex relationship. And then ultimately it becomes a source of enormous betrayal for him. I mean, in a sense, it's a sort of emotional barometer, of course, because if he puts himself in situations where he's anxious sexually or, with someone he doesn't really want to be with, it won't perform for him. I mean, penises are very good at showing who's boss in that situation.
Right.
But I mean, the fact that they've got all that, they've got this penis which can be very capricious and not do what he wants it to do, and they're with women who are often so ready to humiliate him.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing is just so frustrating to watch. And how cruel women are.
Oh, these women who feel like they're entitled to a rock hard dick on demand, and it better not be by Viagra, because and like, who was it? It was Jim Jeffries, who was I believe he's Australian. He said, you women think that you get us men off. Yeah, no, it's not you that gets me off. It's all the nasty shit that's going on in my head that's getting me off, right? And me, the work that I'm doing, that's getting me off, right?
Oh, I don't know. I refuse to believe it's just that. I like to think
I
we're,
don't think it's
we're
just
part
that
of
either,
the equation.
but when you,
Because otherwise, why do the men so yearning to look at us when we're naked? You know?
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
these women, they think that they can just lie back and just let him do all the work, and his orgasm is his responsibility, right?
But
And
her orgasm is
correct,
his responsibility too.
yeah.
I know.
And I mean, I was talking to this one girl. I mean, she was 18 years old. I worked with her. She was one of the servers, and all of the other servers used to tease her because she was very naive. And one day she comes up to me. She was dating a guy who was about 23, 24 years old. And she comes up to me. She's just distraught. She says, Zane and the other guys were telling me that my boyfriend masturbates. Is that true? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what? Why would he do that? We have sex all the time. Why would he even do that? And I'm like, 'cause he can. Right?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, how often? And I'm like, every day. Every day. Right? And she's like, what? And then we get to talking about, I'm like, well, okay, so don't you masturbate? She's like, no, I would never. And I'm like, well, how do you even know what you like? She says, he's just supposed to know.
I know. Oh, I mean, my master's research 40 something years ago was about teaching women who never had orgasm to come for the first time using masturbation. I mean, that's what and it's just basic that lots of women don't learn enough about anything about their bodies because they don't discover masturbation growing up. I'm just appalled at the fact that 40 years later, our figures on that, we have a good sex research project that's done every few years, and it's shown it's hardly shifted. Even in this, everyone complains about this sexualized culture. Girls aren't necessarily learning to masturbate any earlier, and it means they don't know enough about their bodies. They don't even know what an orgasm feels like, let alone being able to teach a man how to give them one, how to help them reach orgasm, and that whole attitude is just craziness.
Well, and because every woman is a little bit different from every other. I mean, I'm sure every man is different too in some ways, right? In terms of what kind of, but men generally, you give one man the same stimulation as you give the next man, and he's going to be able to, you know, there's variations in terms
They're
of
really easy to please.
they
I mean,
are.
essentially.
There's variations
I
in terms of what they really like, but in terms of just the physical stimulation, you're pretty much it's pretty narrow skill set, right?
Although I must say, can I just tell you, there was a fascinating television program in Australia last year, which had this comedian who had his comedy routine is all about the fact that he's a 34-year-old and he's only had sex twice. He's a bit nerdy and awkward, and they had this clever idea of doing a show with him where they teach him about sex. So they brought in all sorts of some really good people and some terrible people. I mean, they just went overboard with lunatics, getting him to do things that were totally inappropriate. I can't remember where I'm going with all this. Lost my train of thought.
We were talking about how easy it is to please men.
Yeah, but I know. And one of the things he went to was a guy who teaches men about masturbation, and I think he teaches women too about male masturbation techniques. And there was this thing called the corkscrew, which I'd never seen before, and I probably went home and tried it out on Ian, and it turned out to be. But it's interesting that you can always still learn something, and part of it is all I mean, I didn't want to leave it just saying all men are the same, because every man has his own special treats.
Yeah.
And it's also up to us to try to find out about that. But
every man can survive on. Most men can survive on meat and potatoes without the treats.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Women
are
so
hopeless.
Finicky. They're so finicky. I mean, like even just myself, right? I have never had a vaginal orgasm. I don't think I'm capable of that. I can get a lot of pleasure out of that, but I don't think I'm capable of that. And generally, I need a lot of concentration. And if I have that concentration, it can happen in 30 seconds, right? Just bam, top of my head just blows right off. But it has to be sort of in a certain way, and that's not necessarily the way most guys are used to it happening.
Yeah.
Right? And so I let them know ahead of time, okay, so if this is not going to, I want you to get off through vaginal sex. That's what that goal is. And for me, I'm going to have to do this other thing either before or after, and hopefully that's okay with you. And don't think that I'm not turned on, right? Don't think that I'm not enjoying it, because I am, right? But I mean, we're so different in terms of, I think, and there is a theory in evolutionary biology that female orgasm is complicated like this because it's actually what they call a spandrel. Like nipples for men. Men don't lactate, but they have nipples. And they have nipples because women have to have nipples. And so there's a theory or a hypothesis that the reason why women orgasm isn't because they need to orgasm. It doesn't really give them any measurable advantage in terms of the number of children that they have or how successful they are at securing a mate or anything. They have it as a byproduct of the fact that men need it, right? Yeah. And so it's maybe not every woman is capable. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting area. My personal background is that I had needed the really direct clitoral stimulation for a huge part of my life, and then for some reason, and I think it was probably as emotional as much as anything else, it all changed for me. I was widowed, and I went through a highly emotional experience with the first man I was with after that, the loss of my husband, and all of a sudden I climaxed vaginally, and I look back on that and think, huh? I mean, no one ever talks about that.
Yeah.
Although interestingly, of course, Freud was one of the ones who said that women move from clitoral orgasm in masturbation through to responding vaginally, and there are a few people who have been puzzling this out of whether, if we learn to climax with direct clitoral stimulation and we get used to that really intense stimulation, the sensations involved in vaginal response are very different.
Yeah.
And we don't learn to anticipate pleasure when we start to feel them. And maybe there's a proportion of women who are never learning anymore because they don't let themselves. I don't know. And it's something, what's interesting to me is it's a really taboo area. Yeah. Even to suggest vaginal orgasm might be important, that even to talk about the statistics gets you into trouble.
Right.
I mean, because there's a constant misinformation out there that only a small proportion of women are vaginally responsive. Because, of course, the Sherry Height, famous sex researcher, I mean, she did surveys where self-selected women wrote in and talked about their sexual experiences. And she got a huge proportion of women who don't climax vaginally responding to that. And that's been presented as the norm, that only a third of women climax no hands without additional.
Right.
And yet we have had some really interesting studies done in Australia on twins, trying to sort out what is the genetic component in orgasm in women. And those figures, just this random collection of women, you had well over half the women were saying they were responding no hands vaginally, and then there's a whole bunch of surveys showing that. So there's a lot of misinformation around that, but the bottom line is, it's very, as you say, it's very much women knowing their bodies, knowing what they need, and being able to teach men about that, and have the men accept it. I know all men want women to come at the drop of a hat. They want women to come the way they come, which is in bonking. And it's just not gonna happen for a lot of women. And I want to read something to you, which is a quote that was written about 40 years ago. I know you wouldn't have come, you're far too young, I think, but a British agony aunt, she was called Irma Kurtz, and she said, naturally women think their own loving, languorous way of sex is better, and so it is for them. Recently, they've been trying to bully and shame men into thinking it would be better for them too, although the truth is it would be less demanding, enslaving, perplexing and strenuous for a healthy man to screw 1,000 women in his lifetime than to try to please one, and the potential for failure would be less.
Oh
And
my.
isn't that fantastic? I mean, that sums it up.
It
That
does.
for men, bonking is easy, coming is usually easy, until they get to a certain age,
Yeah.
all that. But pleasing a woman is so bloody hard.
Oh, and half the time pleasing the woman means you're giving up some of the pleasure that you have, right? Because like I know, and this is one of the stories, like from another story from work, right? There were two of my coworkers who were dating, and he was telling me one night, because I was the person that everybody came to for sex advice for some reason, and he said that this woman that he was with, who had this stunning body. I mean, she just was absolutely gorgeous. She'd had one child, who was, I think, 3 or 4 years old at the time, and so definitely not over the hill, and very, very, she worked out. She was just gorgeous. She was hot. She was freaking hot, and he said she wouldn't even have sex with the TV on because the light from the TV would allow him to see her body. And she had a few stretch marks from the pregnancy, and that was enough to make her not want him to see her. And I'm thinking to myself, like when I'm turned on, when I'm having sex with somebody, I'm not even aware of myself in that way, right? I just, I'm like, I could, like, my boobs could be sagging, like my bum is dimply, whatever, right? Like, none of that even matters if I'm excited about what I'm doing. I don't care about the look on my O face, I guess you call it, right? My boyfriend has commented that I look like an autistic child having a seizure when I come, and he's probably about right. And I just don't care. I don't. It
No.
doesn't bother me, and it doesn't bother any of the guys that I've been with.
But have you always been like that?
I was a little more, and it is ironic, right? I was a little more self-conscious when I was younger and had a hotter body and all of that stuff, right? And fewer flaws.
It's tragic.
Oh, of course, because you're younger, and I think that it's tied into that sort of that same thing, that fear, because you don't necessarily see middle-aged women talking about being scared walking home from the grocery store at night. You hear these women in their sexual prime who are talking about being scared, right? And I think that those anxieties of being at your sexual prime, right? There are a whole bunch of internal things that are bubbling up to the surface in terms of am I presenting myself in such a way that I can get the best possible mate at this best possible time, blah, blah, blah. And as you get older, it just starts to mellow. You start to mellow out a lot. And, but, like my sister, she, when she was single in her 40s, and she told me that she would get a lot of messages from very young men in their late teens, early 20s. And she said that she told them all the exact same thing. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay your dues. You're going to have mediocre sex with women your own age for the next decade. And that's just the way it's going to be. Because I'm not going to come in and ruin you for women your own age, right? And that is kind of
Wow, that's clever. Yeah?
I think women over 30, they're just less self-conscious. They're more adventurous. They're more likely to do things that a 23-year-old would say, "Ew, I'm never doing that. Oh my god, disgusting." Right? It's like it's just a guy's bum. You can put your mouth on it. It's okay. He just had a shower. It's like
I know. Yeah. But it's interesting because I suspected you were like that, but I went through a similar thing when I was young and much hotter. I was probably even more self-conscious than I am now, and it gradually learned to get over that with lovely men teaching me to I've never had it. Well, since I've breastfed 3 children, I've had no tits at all, which is really difficult. It was very difficult when I was dating and out there in the single world. I found that really a difficult thing to go to bed with someone new.
Yeah.
And when I was uncomfortable, and yet, I've clung to this thing that men have taught me that it's fine. I have terrific nipples. I have things that work really well.
Yeah.
And I know, and I'm reasonably comfortable, but there's always this initial point, particularly in a new relationship, that's very difficult. And yet, I know I've come a hell of a long way compared to most women, and so many women just never look in the mirror and like what they see. And it really inhibits them in during sex, because they're always covering up and walking around with sheets around their neck, and that's what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
All the time. I put out this video the other day all around sex, and I included this lovely, it was a little ad really for something to do with female sexuality, but it was a woman, and she's obviously got someone going down on her, and the sheets there's this sort of, you see her face and you see the sheets moving below her, and she's saying yes, how wonderful it all is, and then she starts to worry and think, oh my God, I haven't waxed, and I'm this and I'm that, and he'll notice my fat thighs, and all that starts to kick in. And that is so common for women, that they just never get that chatter out of their heads, and they never stop thinking about the man is judging them, and the man is noticing everything that's wrong with them. And of course, men don't think like that in bed. I mean, it's so rare that a man is judgmental about a woman's body. He's just really happy to be there with her and to have a go at, to see it. He wants to see it as well as touch it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some exceptions, because I do think we need to think about this whole business of obesity, and that's a problem which I'm encountering a lot with my dating women.
Right.
There is a limit to how, that I'm saying most men find their lover's body very attractive, no matter what it looks like. But, I mean, fat is not very sexy. And we have huge numbers of men and women, but particularly with the women, that can be a real shield, and particularly in a marriage, where part of the reason they're eating so much is it helps ward him off. Oh. It means that he's not going to find her attractive anymore.
I find that, there is, even with women who are overweight, right? And women who would be technically considered to be morbidly obese, right? If you have that shape, right? If you have that shape, there's going to be a guy out there that finds you attractive. If you go in at the waist and out at the hips, and you're bigger around the chest than you are around the middle, right? You're probably going to find at least a couple of guys out there who find you attractive. It is the type of obesity that's happening now in Western countries is not that kind of Rubenesque,
that's gorgeous, curvy,
yeah, and even lumpy. I mean, like even if you look at some of those old paintings, right? The women had dimply bums. They had, they were a little bit lumpy. But they did have the shape, the traditional female shape. I'm on video here, so all right.
Right?
Yeah, he was gonna walk behind the camera, but I warned him off.
Okay.
But what we have now is we have the equivalent of like a tomato on toothpicks, and and that is just, no matter how thin or how curvy a woman is, if she has that hourglass figure, some men are going to find her attractive. But if she doesn't have, and the type of obesity that we have now, whether it's through certain hormones in the food and in the environment, and just the types of foods that we eat that aren't necessarily good for us.
That's putting things in your mouth. That's all it is. It's about stuffing yourself full of food.
Well, it is, but you can stuff yourself full of certain types of food and be a little bit overweight and still have that shape, right?
Yeah,
but depending on the types of foods that you eat.
We've tipped over into a whole different...
Yeah.
And this whole, fat is beautiful, women should accept their bodies. I mean, all that is playing into it, and its heart is once again an indifference to men and
Yeah.
an indifference to male desire. Because what does it say if you can't make enough effort to keep yourself in some sort of shape, and you'd prefer to be just stuffing yourself full of chocolate every night? I
Well,
mean, I think it's a pretty big warning sign for men, isn't
one
it?
thing one thing I found hilarious is, like, because you have this entire industry of books that's catering toward women and their desires, right? And one of the, sort of, you have romance, and then you have romantic erotica or erotic romance, whatever you want to call it, and you have a subgenre of that called Big Beautiful Woman,
Yeah,
right? And it's about fat women who all manage to get guys who look like Brad Pitt. They're not
yeah,
getting men who are as fat as they are, or who are, you know, uh, they're a four because they're really fat, and so the guy that they get is a four because he's like a gorky looking pencil neck geek guy or whatever, right? No, they're getting all of these hunky guys, right? Who accept their bodies, accept them as they are, their big, beautiful bodies. And it's just like, okay, so you're allowed to have this fantasy as a fat woman. You're allowed to have this fantasy without shame that you're going to land this super hot guy that every single woman would throw her panties at, right? And yet men aren't allowed to say, okay, I look like Bill Gates, but I'd really love to fuck a woman who looks like Ivanka Trump, right?
yeah,
Like that's being a dick. That's being
yeah,
shallow, right?
yeah,
And I'm just like, are you kidding me? And especially
yeah,
since when you actually look at the criteria of men and women, right? Looks, like, the visual is much more
yeah.
fundamental
Absolutely.
to men's sexual response than it is with women. Men can compensate with women. If they are unattractive physically, they can compensate in any number of ways.
Yeah,
Sense of humor, financial success, really charming, all of these
yeah,
things, confidence, right? And that'll turn a woman on, even if he's not a, like, an eight or above, right? But with in the looks department, but with men, physical appearance is an extremely important part of what attracts
yeah.
them to a
Absolutely.
woman.
Where do we stop? It goes on and on.
I don't
Yeah,
even know. I think maybe this is a place to stop for
yeah.
today. Um, and I'll have to have you back on. I don't know whether we're gonna host this whole thing. Maybe we can host the whole thing on both of our channels. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but
Well, it's very long. Anyway, we can think about it, or chop it up. I don't know. Have a think.
there you go.
Yeah, I think put it on both our channels. Yeah, you just have to tell me when you're going to do
Yeah,
it.
I will. I will render the video and I will let you know, and we'll go from there. And thank
Karen,
you
it's been
so
great
much.
fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Awesome. All
I
right.
knew it would be fun talking to you about sex.